Hey guys, how's it going? We got some new PoE2 news and I'm coming at you with a quick video to try and cover it. Last 24 plus hours have been pretty interesting. We've got some pretty key news out of the Tokyo Game Show. Some of it's going to piss people off. Some of you might have been expecting it, but let's just rip the band-aid off and talk about it. First up is that early access is going to be paid. There is going to be paid access for that. It won't be free. Secondly is that we won't be receiving the amount of content we kind of expected. Initially, they announced 6 acts that it would be fully fleshed out. That would be the end game as well. We won't be getting that on early access release. We'll be getting 3 acts. And we'll also be getting some end game, but it sounds like it's going to be quite limited. If you guys aren't following the website PoE2DB, I'll link that in the description so you can check it out. They are keeping that website up to date with all the news as it's releasing. It's where I get some of my information as well, or where I cross-check information just to make sure I haven't picked up a source that, is kind of talking bullshit. But let's break that down. So first of all, we'll talk about the paid access, right? So we've been advised that the paid access will be $30 and you'll receive $25 worth of their in-shop currency, which if you're a new player isn't actually too bad. I always say to people when I'm talking about Path of Exile that once you get to the end game, you probably want to buy some stash tabs, right? The game can be quite difficult if you don't have stash tabs to play. So $25 will get you those. If you're a returning Path of Exile 1 player with stash tabs, you will see those in Path of Exile 2, along with your other MTX and items. They've announced that before, so that's not particularly new news. But look, I think the value proposition there isn't too bad. And the second part of that is, if, however, you've spent more than, I think it's $480 in Path of Exile 1, then you'll be getting into early access for free. I do love that they support their supporters. Most big companies will look at those people and think, hey, those whales are going to pay for this anyway, so fuck them. But at least with Grinding Gear Games, they'll give you that access, whether you're happy with it or not. So this is something they've done before, and I was expecting this. I think a lot of people were. Before the initial beta announcement, they talked about their price or their entry structure being the same as what they did for Fall of Oriath way back when, which was essentially, if you'd spent the money, you'd get in, there'd be random waves, otherwise it would be paid. Now for early access, they're almost certainly going to have supporter packs, and they've actually said they're going to have supporter packs. So you can buy a supporter pack. Those are generally a bit more on the pricey side, and those will get you access as well. So just a quick editing note here, guys. So the post that I'm putting up on screen now, again, just flagging that the supporter packs will be announced during a live stream in about a month's time. And at that point, we'll get more information on these, just as a heads up. Look, I knew this was coming at some point. I was starting to believe maybe it wasn't. I'm surprised at the level of, information coming out of Grinding Gear Games. It's very haphazard. I'll talk about that a bit more later as well, but I think their marketing team, or I think maybe they need to consult a marketing team. I think the problem we're seeing is we have 3 different game directors. They probably have a consensus on what they'll talk about. But the problem is you've got 3 different game directors going between different interviews, all giving out random tidbits of information. While it can be exciting, and it gives me something to do as a YouTuber, it also means we get a lot of random information just cropping up here and there. Some of it starting to contradict itself. And I think that's where we're starting to see a little bit of discourse in the community. I've seen some people really aren't happy with this. Some people are jumping up to defend Grinding Gear Games. I'm going to be honest, I'm almost sitting on the fence with this one. Not because I'm trying to be neutral or anything. I do think they need to address their marketing, but let's cover the rest first, then we'll talk about that. And the second point that I raised is that early access is only going to have 3 acts. This one I'm really surprised by. It was not long ago, Jonathan told us we would have the full 6 acts and fleshed out endgame at release. Now we're being told we'll have 3 acts, and according to... Actually, let me get it up. According to PoE2DB, which I will flash on the screen for you guys, because I'm not recording that right now, it says we're going to have 30 plus maps, which is quite low, which is incredibly low for an endgame. And that we're also only going to have 1 ascendancy per archetype, so per class, and that it's looking like we may not even have the full roster of 12 characters on release as well. So this is where I think a lot of the disappointment is coming in. Again, my 2 cents, my opinion on this, I'm not that bothered. They're not pushing it back. That would be the biggest thing for me. If they were pushing it back, I'd be a bit disappointed. We've already had that once, and we're about 6 weeks out. if that, at this point. And I think that's my problem, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are having problems is we're 6 weeks out. We were told to expect 6 acts. We were told to expect an end game. We were told to expect, pretty much a solid experience. Jonathan had said this would be a release that was on par with most full game releases, even though it had the early access tag, and the early access tag was so that they could test things, change things, and address them as they came up, which they're still going to do. Obviously, that's still part of the early access process. That's how it works. And this is the problem, right? It's the marketing, unfortunately. Previously, we've had Jonathan come out and say, 6 acts at release, characters will be there, there'll be a fully fleshed out end game. And he was quite clear about there needing to be a fully fleshed out end game, because if you don't have that, what are players sticking around for? So now it's really surprising to see that they're cutting that back. This was information discussed by Trevor Gammon in an interview with a Japanese news station, or I shouldn't say news station, with the Japanese team. I'll link that in the description as well. Obviously, it's Google translated, so this is again where we're running into the issues. And I think, again, I want to make my position clear. I'm not that bothered by this. I don't mind paying for early access. I don't think I've spent enough to get the free key, but I'll have to check my spending on that one. I'm not as worried about spending for that. That's fine. What does confuse me, though, is this back and forth. We were initially told beta in June. That was then pushed back to November. I don't have a problem with that. I'm more than happy for companies to release things when they're ready. So I think that was fine. Obviously, I was disappointed. I think a lot of people in the community were disappointed, but I'm not going to fucking lose sleep over it. So that's whatever. But then to come out and say, yep, November 15th, we're launching with everything. That threw the player expectations to the moon. And I think that's what they're dealing with now. That's why we're seeing a little bit of backlash in the community. I think a lot of that is going to settle over the coming days. I think by the end of the week, people are going to be over it. They're not going to be that bothered. In my opinion, 3 acts, 6 acts, I don't really care. This is what we got with the PoE originally. With the first game, it released in smaller sections, and then obviously the rest of it came later. If they're doing that for Path of Exile 2, I'm not that bothered. It at least means we can get in, try the 3 acts, and then hell, when the other 3 come out, it'll be some fresh content. It'll be something to run. But at the end of the day, PoE 2 is an ARPG. You're there to kill monsters, get loot, run maps, right? It doesn't really matter to me if I'm running the same 30 maps instead of a combination of 100 maps. So we'll see how we go with that. But I want to talk one more time about the marketing. I think Grinding Gear Games have done themselves the largest disservice with their marketing structure, which we're now seeing bite them in the ass, essentially. We had some really good hype building. There was a pretty good hype train going. We kept getting tidbits of information, and that's what Grinding Gear Games marketing strategy is really good at. Giving us little tidbits, getting people excited. We see this, we see that, we get a character reveal, then we see a little bit something else, then we hear about damage numbers. And there's a lot in the Tokyo Game Show that I'm going to cover in a video later in the week. But the problem is when you get all these little bits of information trickling out, and then things change in the studio, and they have to move plans, they have to reduce acts on the early access release, the player base feels like the rug's been pulled out from under them, right? They were told to expect this. They're now getting half of what they were told to expect. And that's where you're going to get a lot of pushback. Now, it was early. There are going to be a lot of people in the comments saying, yeah, well, they said it was early access. And I agree. They said it was early access. Again, I'm not bothered. I'm just trying to explain what's going on in the community here. People are pissed. Especially because, again, Path of Exile 2 was said to be a free game. Now, if you're somebody like me, or like you, if you're watching this video, I assume you probably knew that some of that was going to be changing. You probably remembered that the initial plan for beta was for it to be paid access, or for it to be, given to those people who have spent a lot of money, as we discussed earlier. That was always the plan. The problem is they never told us that plan was changing, but then they started talking about early access instead of beta. And while to a lot of people, those are very similar, and essentially they are very, very similar. I'd say early access maybe is like it crosses over with beta in my mind. Like you'd have a beta before early access, and then early access is continuing that beta essentially. But I think the general population sees that language differently. And I think that's the problem they're running into here. Is we were told we were going to be having a beta and it was going to have a pricing structure. Then they scrapped that. We were told we were going to have early access, and that on release, the game was going to be free. But that was full release. They never stated that early access was going to be free, But they said Path of Exile 2 was going to be free to play like Path of Exile 1. And that's where that disconnect in the community has come from. And that's because they don't have great communication coming out. Now, this kind of communication works really well when things are on track. But we're off track now. And now we're seeing the fallout from that. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested to hear what you're thinking. Again, are you like me? Are you kind of like, meh, whatever, it was kind of expected? Or are you devastated by this information? Path of Exile 2 looks to be such an enormous game that I think what we're going to get on release is still going to be on par with a lot of other game releases. Even with 3 acts, even with a smaller character roster, even with smaller ascendancies, we are still going to get quite a breadth of content, I think. And for me, I just want to jump in and start playing the game. I want to get a feel on it. I've not, I live in Australia. I haven't been able to get to any of these events, play the demos, anything like that. So I'm just curious to try it out. That's all I want. But what are your thoughts below? Are you now going to be waiting? Are you going to be waiting for it to be free? Do you want to pay? Are you upset that there's 3 acts instead of 6? Do you think that's going to harm the experience? And if so, why? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, like, subscribe if you want more. But you being here, that's enough for me. I appreciate it. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you next time. Cheers.